Quentin Arbogast was a legendary thief for two very distinct reasons. The first reason was his level of skill and the deftness with which he used it. Sometimes it took the targets days to realize that they had been robbed. In other cases, it took weeks. Quentin took the concept of light fingers and raised it to an exponential level. He hit only the toughest jobs with the biggest payouts. The second reason Quentin Arbogast was considered a legend was when he was at the top of the mountain, when he was considered the king of thieves, he walked away. He'd stolen enough. He'd accumulated enough money and property and resources to quit the game for good. And unlike every other dumb-ass motherfucker who faces that choice, Quentin picked the right path. He was no longer a pro. At age 47, he retired. Of course, for a master thief like Quentin Arbogast, there's always the call of the work. Beyond a certain point, it's about pride, not money. The truth was, he could have retired 10 years earlier. He chose not to because he loved what he did. Quentin lived in a penthouse in Chicago, where he kept the art studio that had served as his legitimate front for so many years. He'd grown tired of the art trade. Now that he wasn't stealing priceless works of art himself, it held no interest for him. He tried playing golf, but bored of it after a few months. He tried sport fishing, gambling, even the dark gambling. He wagered on the sordid games of the gunny men, but even that fell flat. Then he took up paying for prostitutes as a hobby. Men, women, any exotic mix therein. Quentin indulged every hedonistic whim that he had ever held in check due to professional integrity over the years. But, like golf or sport fishing, that only lasted a few months as well. He already knew, deep in the back of his mind, that there would never be a thrill or a high or a moment as sweet as the steal. So, he started to steal. Not professionally, mind you. He was still 100% retired. This was just for a bit of fun. Little stuff, at first, to get rid of the ring rust. From cars, to cop cars, to military vehicles. From watches, to jewelry, to museum showpieces. From priceless antiques, to treasured historical documents, to treasonous files on hard drives. He stole just to steal. Sometimes he would return it through the post. Sometimes he would throw it in the dump. Sometimes he would put it back where it didn't belong just because it amused him to do so. Like when he stole the Great Star of Africa, and then left it wrapped like a birthday gift on the front steps of Sandringham House. Or when he spent a whole weekend stealing the original Declaration of Independence just so that he could break into Nicolas Cage's foyer and hang it. It was just a goof. All of these jobs were just a little spot of fun to brighten up his retirement. He was not open to working new jobs for other people. But if he got an interesting pitch, he would be professional enough to listen and offer his advice. Until one day, in 2015, Quentin Arbogast got an offer he couldn't refuse. It came from a priest who wanted to break into an impenetrable vault beneath a centuries-old fortress to steal an infamous painting called the Ravenous One. This is the Ghastly Heist. Drinking whiskey in the kitchen and telling scary stories around the fire. Music, monsters, and mayhem. Killers, cannibals, and cults. Fearful fiction and furious fact. Tall tales and terrifying truths. This is a scary home companion. They met at a public park, right next to a daycare. Quentin sat next to the priest, and they pretended to watch the children play. The vault is very old, the priest said, but the door mechanisms have been replaced with custom technology several times over the years. The security outside the church is very tight. DRO agents supervise it around the clock, buttressed with local security personnel. Quentin nodded, taking notes in his head. That said, there is no internal security, aside from the cameras. Although they watch and protect the outside of the fortress, the DRO are strictly prohibited from entering the building. It has a history of gas leaks. Many people have died in this church, Mr. Arbogast. So the problem is simply getting inside of the building and then out again. Once inside, the job is simple. Open the vault, find the painting, and a few other items. What other items? Sealed glass jars, handwritten copies of books, a few assorted trinkets. But the painting and the jars are your primary focus. What's in the jars? The priest could read the room. He clearly saw that this conversation was over if he didn't answer truthfully. This church used to be run by a fanatical religious order. They killed a great many people and kept what they said were biological specimens of the devil. And why, pardon my language, Father, but why the fuck would you want those? They are parts of human beings, sir. They deserve a Christian burial so that their souls might rest. What I need from you is to remove these few simple items from that vault and deliver them to me at an airstrip 3 miles away. There was a moment of silence between them. Children shrieked on the merry-go-round as the bigger kids started to push it too fast. Both men watched and grinned, but for very different reasons. Quentin started to offer the priest his professional advice, but he didn't want to hear it. Then he started to offer a few people he might know that could do the job, and the priest didn't want to hear that either. I came for you, Mr. Arbogast. I want you to do this. As a matter of courtesy, I will ask you to name your price. My associate is right over there. He has an ample retainer for your services, in cash. But I know that you're not interested in money. I have enough money. What else is in it for me? The priest slid closer to him. He shook a mint out of a tin and crunched it between his teeth. You can see the painting, the ravenous one. You can touch it. You can examine it. I know that you're dying to, Mr. Arbogast. The priest was right. Living in the art world for 20-plus years, Quentin had heard all the stories about the notorious cursed painting. But while curiosity was enough to tempt him, it still wasn't worth the risk. The priest added, I will also let you keep an artifact of your choosing from this vault. Not the painting or the jars, but anything else that you choose. I will then give you the personal home address of Special Agent Bill Handel. He is of great rank and importance with the DRO these days. You can give it back to him in a manner of your choosing, so that he knows exactly who it was that was able to steal from the DRO. Quentin didn't answer, and that was answer enough. Lovely. My man Nicholas here will see to the details, and I will see you at the airstrip after it's done. The priest walked away, and a painfully handsome man approached Quentin. He was holding a heavy satchel. Inside the satchel were building blueprints, technical specs, exterior photos, personal notes, and $800,000 in walking around money. Quentin rifled through it, nonplussed. Yeah, great. I'm going to need all the intel that you have on the DRO agents posted to the fortress. And you're going to need to double this money unless you want me hiring guys from the fucking bus station. I'll be in touch. Quentin Arbogast fell right back into work mode, just like that. A few years had passed, but he still knew who to call about who to call. He had a lot of industry friends. Besides, he didn't need much of a team. He never did. Regardless of what heist movies might say, a big squad is bad news for any job. More people involved means more chefs in the kitchen, more moving parts to malfunction, more loose lips to sink ships. In the past, Quentin had worked with 2, maybe 3 other people at a time, and even that was rare. For this job and its unique specs, he was going to need more manpower than usual. The actual heist only required 1 highly skilled tech specialist. But to carry all the shit he was going to steal, he was going to need 3, maybe 4 stout men. And these 3, maybe 4 stout men were interchangeable. They didn't matter. But for tech, it did matter. There was only one person that Quentin trusted absolutely. Mona Skellington. That was her handle, but not her name. Mona was the single greatest computer genius that Quentin had ever encountered. When he reached out, Quentin learned that Mona had a steady job now, and a damn good one. She was running the IT department for Lila Ambrose. Of course, Quentin couldn't help but to ask why Lila fucking Ambrose, the fashionista, needed such a nuclear option grade hacker to run her IT department. Mona wouldn't comment about that. She just said she was being paid well enough that she didn't want any other work. Quentin doubled her old rate, and then doubled it again, until finally he heard her sigh. Fine. But this is a goodbye present, old man, you hear me? Although it would have been easier and cheaper to hire local muscle from Grand Bahama, Quentin went through an old friend to hire some muscle from Miami to fly over with him. He wanted no one that had been there, and he wanted no one staying behind on that island when the job was done. This was one of the easiest rules of stealing. One so basic that most people overlooked it. But really, not hanging around the place where you just stole shit is the easiest way to get away with stealing shit. He ended up with 3 large, stocky men who had developed reputations for following orders and not talking. There was Gonzo, Jinder, and a man called Twee Bruce, who looked very much like a skunk ape who had shaved his hands and his feet and then squeezed into bib overalls. Quentin kept the 3 men entirely in the dark. He gave them a cover story about vacation. He booked them in a room where they wouldn't stand out and told them to be ready to work at his call. It would have been a liability to tell them anything about the job itself. They were just muscle. Mona was fully in the loop. She analyzed his data, she got him additional intel, even provided the deep background on the fortress. This massive, fortified church had been built by a secretive Catholic order over 200 years ago. They had occupied it continuously until 2013, when there was a horrible accident. A gas leak, allegedly, although Mona found it suspicious that only the DRO and the Order had made official statements concerning the 115 deaths that occurred that day. That had been the end of the Order. But the fortress remained. And one of the only survivors, a priest named Frank Rourke, took over the church for some months with a new staff. That's when the stories started. People disappeared. Children went missing from the streets. Strange, otherworldly sounds came from inside the sanctuary late at night. The locals considered it cursed. There was a brief, fleeting attempt by Frank Rourke to open the church for services, but they were sparsely attended. One night, there was another gas leak. The DRO seized control of the fortress soon after, and Frank Rourke disappeared. Quentin saw pictures of Rourke, and it was obviously the same priest who had hired him for this job. It was red flag after red flag. And yet, Quentin couldn't shake it. He was increasingly obsessed with this heist. He was a man who had seen everything. And for the fucking life of him, he couldn't figure out what could possibly be inside this vault. Quentin spent 3 days in West End, Grand Bahama, getting a feel for the place. This was part of his process. The plan itself, like all great plans, was very simple. Very few moving parts. No flash, no sizzle. There was a misdirection, a safe cracking, and an escape. Nothing more complicated than that. But he always spent time beforehand to get comfortable in the surroundings. Knowing the environment was very important. There was only one variable in play, and that was his contact, Nick. Nick was a key piece of this plan. He was the distraction, but he was also disposable. Nick went first. When he was successful, then the heist started. If Nick failed in his role, then the job ended then and there before it even started. They all walked away. Nick was disposable and detached from the rest of them. Quentin studied his points of ingress and egress for the neighborhood, the fortress, and the waterways beyond. He rented a boat from a nearby slip and loaded up the lightweight scuba gear into rucksacks. It all felt right. He was comfortable. He was ready. He called the lads. He told them the time had come. And then, after the sun had set, he made the call and activated Nick. As the distraction, Nick was going to lead a handful of people on an assault of a local apartment building where the DRO's head of security was currently off shift. A DRO agent under fire would draw away the 3 other DRO agents assigned to the fortress. This was their protocol. The fortress would temporarily be under the command of the local police. And, as it came to pass, for the reasonable sum of $40,000 American, Quentin had been able to convince the local police that it was worth looking the other way for a while. If Mona could work her magic in record time, then they could walk into the building, load up, and walk out the way they came. If the DRO returned, or if anything else went sideways, they would need to use this scuba gear and leave via a submerged access tunnel. The boat he had rented was anchored nearby, and it was a bit of a schlep, but it would work in a pinch. They waited in a van, camouflaged amongst the other cars, in a parking lot 2 blocks from the fortress. Quentin wore an earpiece and talked to Mona. "I'm listening into the DRO channel," she told him. "And here it is. We have a call. Gunfire, a protocol code. Agent Enright is officially calling for backup. Here we go." Moments later, 2 black sedans rocketed past. Suddenly, the other guard posts were all empty. "The cameras are dead," Mona said. "Thank you, my dear. We still have that other dedicated system here, Quentin. We discussed it before. It can't be shut off. It's controlled remotely by another system I can't access. It shouldn't matter, but still, be cautious." On the way inside, Quentin stopped to examine one of these unusual little black boxes that had been placed around the perimeter of the fortress. All Mona could figure out about them was that it was custom DRO tech and emitted low-level pulses of microwave radiation. That was what they were. But why they were here? That was a question she couldn't answer. The four men entered the fortress. The doors were unlocked. Mona had cut all security measures to the whole building, along with the cameras. All Quentin and the boys had to do was just wind their way down into the rock foundation and locate the vault door. They were in a cavernous narthex. The threadbare carpet and walls were dusted with a strange red mold. "Mask up, boys," he said. They had all come equipped with full-face gas masks, based on the priest's comment about gas leaks. This mold troubled him a lot more than any gas leak could have. The doors to the sanctuary had been sealed, but then chopped open from the inside. The thieves lingered, staring at the doors. Quentin led them off to the left and down into the belly of the fortress. Twee Bruce lingered behind, just for a moment. He moved to the door and put his head against it. He peered through one of the cracks. He saw strange symbols painted on the walls and the floor. The pews had all been smashed and cleared aside, and the center of the room had been turned into a knife garden. Hilts wedged into cracks in the stone floor, blades pointing straight up. Hundreds of them, all stained and crusted, nicked and bent and used, blooded every one. The sanctuary hummed with a dark energy. Twee Bruce backed away. He looked after the boys, and then he looked at the front door, and he clucked his tongue. "Sorry, boys." With Mona leading the way, disabling all the security measures, they found the vault in 3 minutes. Gonzo wanted to go back for Twee Bruce, but Quentin said no dice. "We stay together, we let all dead weight fall to the side, and we do not look back." Time was of the essence. Quentin connected a special hard drive to the vault control panel. He patched in Mona, who told him, "The DRO agents have arrived at the hotel. Seems that the shooting is over already. One way or the other, it's done." "Thank you," Quentin said. "And you are working, yes?" "Yes," she said crisply. And then nothing else. She didn't want to talk. She didn't need to talk. She was working. And Quentin let her. He waited patiently. Mona was the best, he knew that. It wouldn't help to micromanage, and it's not like he fucking understood any of this shit anyway. Mona had explained it to him in painstaking detail, but it was like a foreign language. Still, he got the core concept that what Mona was doing was stripping away the various updates made to the security protocols over the years to revert it back to a simpler and more crackable code. She updated him. "As of 2 minutes ago, all the DRO agents went radio silent. I think it's safe to say they're on to us, and they're coming back." "That's fine," he said, very calmly. He knew the DRO protocols, and they were very specific. They were very strict. No agents were to enter this building under any circumstances. So really, he had all the time in the world. That said, the next 2 minutes were agonizingly slow. But then the vault door grunted, farted, cracked open. None of them were prepared for what they found inside. The bodies especially. Amid the hundreds of glass jars, the racks of books and tightly covered artifacts and pieces of art were a series of coffin-sized glass boxes. Inside each of these boxes was a human being. Perfectly preserved, hermetically sealed, skin hugging tightly to bone. Based on the finger smudges and dried flecks inside the coffins, these people had been sealed up alive and then suffocated. "I do not like this, Quentin," Gonzo murmured. "I fucking don't like it either. Stuff as many of those jars into these bags as quick as you fucking can so we can go." Most of the jars looked empty, except for maybe a black smudge or a puddle of goo in the bottom of some of them. But once the men started picking them up, moving around the room and throwing them into bags, they noticed the black lumps were inside of all the jars. Some big, some small, but they were all moving. As if responding to the new life in the room, these oozing green-black slugs were slithering around inside the smooth glass, searching for a way out. The priest had told Quentin they were biological specimens, and although they did look organic to him, they were most certainly not human. Not human at all. But were they slugs? Were they tumors? Regardless of the deal with the priest, he knew he had to keep one of these jars just to figure out what it was that made them worth hiding so deep down. Twee Bruce burst into the vault, breathless. "We can't go out the front. There are a lot of cops here, boss. A fucking lot. I think I heard people coming inside." Gonzo had the only gun, so he stood watch on the door, and also prepped the scuba gear, which they were going to need. The rest of them kept loading up bags. The glass jars weren't heavy, but voluminous enough that they wouldn't be able to carry them all out with them. "We're just going to take whatever we can carry and not worry about the rest," Quentin said to them. He saw the painting in the back. Well, he sensed it. He felt what it was before he saw it. It was a magnetic pull. And when he touched it and lifted it away from the wall, he saw that a piece of wood had been nailed over the top of the canvas. In each of the 4 corners, a small nail head protruded, and they were all coated in a thick black goo. It dazzled green in the dim light, just like the slugs did. Quentin waterproofed the painting for transport and joined the others at the door. They had 60 books, 248 jars, a painting, and an old dagger that seemed to be made from a human femur bone. That one he took for himself, to return to the DRO dicks when this was all said and done. Upstairs, they heard shouting and a series of muffled gunshots. "That's our cue, lads," Quentin said, and they suited up for the swim. Twee Bruce was frozen solid. "Do you hear that?" he whispered. And they did. A chill passed over the group, and one by one they all looked up at the stone ceiling. There was a distant, echoed screaming, but it seemed to be coming from inside their heads. Subsonic wails and inhuman grunts reverberating around in their skulls. It didn't sound like anything that Quentin had ever heard before. It sounded like hell itself had opened its gates. And that's because it had. They found the end of the submerged access tunnel, which Mona had unlocked for them. "Quentin?" She came in real soft across his earpiece. "I think I have to go." What the fuck do you mean you have to go? You have to guide us to the boat." "South-southeast for 1,800 meters. My boss is here, Quentin. I think I'm in deep trouble." And then Mona was gone. The sounds behind them got louder, closer, more intense. They went underwater, but the noise didn't get any quieter because it wasn't coming from out there. Quentin led, the others followed. They swam like their lives depended on it. Although they didn't know it, their lives did depend on it. The tides were strong. The men veered off course more than once, but Quentin got his bearings quickly and locked in on the small beacon he had placed on a cable under his tethered boat. Once they got close enough, it activated, and they located their exodus. They tied all of the bags to the cable under the boat and brought the painting aboard with them. There were clean clothes and shoes for everyone. They dumped the scuba gear and the old clothes overboard. And then they motored away from the lights of the city. After a safe distance had passed, Quentin stopped. He pointed to the small motorized dinghy attached to the back of the boat. "That's for you boys. Take it back to town. Don't go to your old hotel. Get food, hang out, move around, but stay low-key. The chartered plane is leaving at 7 a.m., the same place we came in. You remember it. I'm not going to be there, but you need to be." Quentin shook each of their hands in turn. "It was a pleasure never meeting you, never working with you, and never seeing you again." Quentin had a bad feeling about this next part, and he decided that the boys didn't need to be put at risk. He watched them go, and then grabbed his binoculars to look back at the fortress. It was lit up bright as day, and from the sound of it, half the military was occupying the space around it. Quentin, this paunchy, late middle-aged man, took his insurance policy out of his satchel and then stripped naked. He dove into the water and swam under the boat. It didn't take long, so he didn't need gear. Once dried and dressed, he piloted towards the private airstrip outside of town where he was set to meet the priest. If he didn't have the coordinates, he never would have found this place. What he flew into, that was a private airstrip. This was just a cleared-off set of ruts along the coastline, barely long enough for a takeoff. The strip was located next to a series of short docks. Quentin cut his engine and tied off. At the far end of the docks was another boat, a small, rickety fishing vessel. There was a tall Haitian man with long dreadlocks leaning against the helm. He smoked a cigarette and watched Quentin dock. With every drag, the grid of scars on his shadowy face lit up orange. Quentin took the painting with him. He found the priest waiting. He wasn't alone. There was a woman in a surgical mask with him, and a young boy who seemed to be missing many of his teeth. Behind them was a plane. It was waiting, prepped, ready, stairs down, propellers spinning. The priest tipped his hat. "And the rest of it?" he asked. Quentin told him. The priest barked an order, and 2 more people appeared. He told them to retrieve the packages from under the boat and load them onto the plane. Quentin looked around and saw many more people lurking in the shadows around this makeshift airstrip. They were all armed. But that's not what troubled him. If they had guns, he would have understood that. But these people had knives, axes, machetes. He was not dealing with a businessman. It was clear now. He was dealing with an insane cult leader. And that was when he knew he would not be getting out of this alive. He sincerely hoped that the boys kept their heads down and their mouths shut and made it home safely. They were good workers. Even Twee Bruce. "And now the painting, yes?" the priest said. The woman in the surgical mask used pry bar to peel the wood away from the frame, revealing the sinister majesty of the ravenous one. The priest took a step away and gave Quentin a moment of quiet to appreciate the masterpiece. The thief got to his knees in front of it. He reached out, but something twinged in his guts, and he stopped just shy of touching the canvas. Smears of dark paint entranced him. They conjured up the darkest images in his head, and his body was repulsed by it. The hairs on his arms stood up, his stomach churned acid, his mouth went bone dry. He was barely aware of the passing footsteps, the shouted commands. It was only the roar of the passing twin-engine plane as it took off that shook him from his reverie, made him aware of his surroundings once again. He realized that he had been lost in the painting. Now he was watching this dark airplane pull up, and away from the island, veering towards the States. "What do you think?" asked the priest. "It's stunning," said the thief. "Thank you. I painted it, you know." The thief said, "I thought the ravenous one was painted by Ira Dunwich." The priest chuckled. "That is what people say, isn't it?" There was a crunching of boots on gravel, and the two men looked up to see Nick approaching them. It appeared as though he had endured a very rough night. But he was watching the plane fly away with a broad, charming smile on his face. "It's done? Yeah? I'm sorry I'm late. Everything sort of went off the rails, but in the best way possible." The priest clapped him on the shoulder. "I know, I could feel it." Nick looked at Quentin. "Why is he still here? Are we bringing him on board?" The priest shook his head. "Sadly, he's too strong-willed and not of like mind. You can have him if you'd like, or give him to Corinne. She needs to practice her technique before she goes to Atlanta." The thief said, Wait. Please. I was holding back from you. I'm sorry. But just take what I have and let me go, please. I don't need anything. Quentin took the bone dagger out of his pocket. "Is that?" the priest said with a halting voice. His eyes sparkled green. He looked utterly delighted to see this blade. "Oh my, it is." "It is," Quentin said. "It really is." Just behind the dagger was a long, thin device the size of a ballpoint pen. A detonator for his insurance policy. He clicked the end of it. 2 seconds later, 3 miles out to sea, the twin-engine plane exploded. He had hidden the charge in with a bag of jars, and although small, it was enough to rip the plane in half and send wreckage in every direction. The cultists gasped and cried out. Nick swore and pulled his gun. The priest sighed and rubbed his eyes. He looked tired. "I suppose this is my fault. I should have killed you when you docked. I knew that. But if I'm being honest, I really wanted to hear what you thought about my painting." The thief said, "It's transcendent. Really." The priest steepled his fingers. "Thank you. Nick, if you don't mind." Thank you for listening to another episode of A Scary Home Companion. Did this one seem a little incomplete to you? That shootout at the hotel, the strange black boxes surrounding the fortress, the gates of hell opening in the sanctuary? There was a lot more going on than what we saw and heard. That's because there is an entirely separate story going on behind the scenes of the Ghastly heist. Come back next time for Die Standing Up, which features an old friend of ours named Lefty. Check out the show on social media. We're on Twitter, Instagram, and of course, Facebook. Or contact the show directly at ascaryhomecompanion@gmail.com. Better yet, check out the Patreon. That next episode I was telling you about, which is some real cowboy shit, is already on the Patreon, along with exclusive episodes, scripts, analysis videos, and resources to explore the world of Scary Home Companion. And once or twice a year, we give away some merch. The episode was produced and edited by Jeff Davidson, and featured music by Trigg and Gusset with The Vault, J. Surak with Gates Open, and Coolzey with Night Heist, Tenshun, Darker, and possibly my favorite song title ever, Harmitzvah. And, as always, Chelsea Oxendine with the theme music. There are links to all of these great artists in the show notes. Check them out.